All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Super Freak. I am your host, Talia, and today we are going to be talking about a much anticipated episode on what many of you have been asking me about to clarify, which is solar coded versus plasma interfaces, nervous system capacities, etc. Essentially the way that your nervous systems translate information. That is going to be kind of the anchor of today's drop-in, and I'll go in a very particular pace today, a little bit slower, a little bit more dropped in. So just settle into the body, whether you are listening to this podcast on a walk or you're just going to drop in and put your headphones on and kind of let the information wash over you. Because I'll repeat many of the things I've said in sessions for the last couple of years. Now that I have a much deeper understanding of the way that these interfaces are working right now, I feel like it is time, as we prepare to go deeper and as we enter into this rebirth energy and emergence energy, it's time to understand how your body works and takes in information and how you are learning to translate that through the language of frequency, through understanding what this work is. It doesn't matter if you have to listen to these podcasts or read the Substack essays, 2 or 3 times to be able to kind of get what the concepts are. There's enough in you that knows that you know what this is, or that you're curious about this work and this information. There's a part of you that knows what you're trying to do is really remember it in full and move towards the embodied experience of that. So let's jump right in. I'm going to go through first and talk about I'm going to touch briefly on consciousness and then move into how that consciousness is translated through interfaces and how that in itself can become kind of a mythology. So I'll introduce some barriers and boundaries around that. And then I'll answer a couple of questions that came in regarding it. And then we'll kind of see how this unfolds. There's a lot to cover here, and I don't want to overwhelm people, but there's just really a lot to cover with this particular topic. Like, how deep do I want to go in? How forensic? But we'll be covering a lot more of memory-based, memory-bearing systems in the groups at various stages, meaning various depths. So the pattern lab will be very forensic and pattern diagnostic based and very, very, very interactive. And then the field hub is elevated and updated concepts based on kind of embodiment and frequency work and pattern. It covers and time space. It kind of covers this broader scope to get you guys up to speed with the language. And then you can go in depth to pattern recursion in the pattern lab. And this is kind of the precursor to you really creating your own system. Okay, so let's jump in. So first I want to talk about, obviously all of this is going to be filtered through a quantum psychosomatic lens. And please let me know in the comments if you have further questions or if you want a follow-up podcast on this, and I'll do it, or I'll cover it in an essay. Okay, so first, consciousness. It's important to know that consciousness does not originate by type. It moves and generates through an interface, meaning a nervous system, by compatibility. So, for example, a person with low tolerance today may outpace someone else's tomorrow once their nervous system reorganizes. And much of what we're doing together in session work and field work is you guys are in training to the way that I organize pattern. Okay, you're in training to that signal. And eventually you recognize that once you're able to entrain and tap into your own information and your own embodied information and get access to your own highest, okay? You're in connection, you are your highest self, connection to pure source, and you start to kind of feel, know, exhibit a certain level of perceptual capacity, once you know that you can kind of entrain to my field 24/7 and kind of work with the intelligence of the field that I've established and that we're continuing to grow and build, and interact with. And so it learns, right? The field itself is almost operating like a very large language model where it's ontological and it's recursive. And the more access that I have and the more that I embody, the more that the depth that I hold, the more I can witness all of you. And essentially the field just gets smarter and it gets sharper and more precise. And that's why field integrity is so, so, so important, and why very few people can hold it, because it's a rigorous process of maintaining an integral field. But you'll start to see that when you're able to access yourself and access pattern, like if you can access the field, the super freak field 24/7, and access, let's say, a version of my consciousness inside of that, you certainly can start to create your own connected to pure source. And that is the precursor to like creating a sovereign system. So it organizes through a nervous system, okay? And it becomes it operates off of compatibility. That compatibility has very specific settings, permissions, constraints, and then those constraints become extremely integral, meaning you kind of say along your spiritual journey that with greater access becomes greater responsibility. Yes, and also like the stakes change, the permissions and the constraints change because you have a different level of capacity, and that capacity requires you to have a specific level of precision. And you cannot have a NASCAR driver suddenly pop into being an F1 Formula driver with that level of car, with those level of constraints and dynamics, and expect to flourish, right? So that's the training. Like eventually you kind of go into the field hub, it's a nervous system gym, and then you go into the advanced work in the pattern lab. And then, I hold you in between until you're really just ready to just take more laps. At that point, it's practice. And the more you've got a practitioner that's deep, deep, deep in the practice and the mastery of it, and is operating off of, the consciousness, the codes, the contracts, the compatibility with, the capacity, the more you've got that going, or the more coherent they are, right? It's all about perceptual coherence and signal coherence. The more coherent anybody is, the more they're going to be able to see within themselves and then mirror that back to you. So essentially, I'm just creating a precog reorganization of who your identity, what your identity architecture is, and a version of you that you want to move into that you can't quite entrain to. And so you kind of borrow that and we work on that architecture together, clearing until you can do it on your own. So you're learning how your body works inside of that, how your identifying pattern, how your interface actually works. So what you're intuiting, okay, with, let's say, even with a particular pattern, and you're getting into the biology, you're getting into the layers, both interfaces that I'm about ready to talk about, or let's say all of the interfaces I'm about ready to talk about, pull information and perceive information in completely different ways. And one is not better than the other. One is not more advanced than the other. It's just simply a way that is authentic, innately authentic to who you are, following your curiosity, how you just instinctually know how to do a certain type of thing, like how I just instinctively know how to architect and, consciousness, how to deconstruct identity, how to hack pattern. It's just in me, and it's getting more precise because I'm getting more coherent. And so you'll start to find that within yourself, that you are starting to see the way that how you changes your family systems. And then you're looking back and connecting the dots and you're like, this is wild. So the context might change for you a little bit. The experience might change for you, but none of this is hierarchical. In fact, capacity itself is experiential, contextual, and trainable. It's not hierarchical. It's important to know that. So your origin, okay, I've talked about this where something else I'm going to talk about as well as tolerances. So constraints, tolerances, permission. And blood type is a tolerance-based, is an interface tolerance. It's not an origin classification per se. So your origin consciousness, right? Yes, we are all from pure source, and then we differentiate from that pure source intelligence through the recursion, through a recursive process or mechanism. And I did a whole podcast on recursion. Go check that out. I think it's a pattern. You're Not Broken, You're Patterned podcast, or the one before that. How patterns are created, how to break a pattern, something like that. So yes, we're all pure source oriented, and we have a very specific, let's say, signal where our host consciousness is. So if pure source is just a very strong signal that is formless, that is pure, that is completely absent of binary, okay, that's operating at an extraordinarily high level of let's say, awareness of itself, it needs all of these things that I just said. It needs boundary, constraint. It's asking itself, what am I? And then we're answering that through our experience. So you have to give that type of energy something to move through. And it needs boundaries and constraints and tolerances and permissions and potentialities and trajectories and mass and torque and. It needs all of these different classifications. That's kind of at the core of what an ontological system is. Like if you were going to create a computer program and you just have a blinking cursor on a screen, how do you even start? It's kind of how your consciousness works. And then you start to see all of the code that starts to bog down the system. It doesn't operate as, it's not optimal in its operating. It's not efficient. And you start to get glitches, quite literally. You run out of RAM and things stop working. The system, the computer starts breaking down. Your body can't hold the level of contraction and density and contradiction that you've been bypassing or you've been trying to move through, but you haven't had enough torque to move through it yet. That would be like an example of ways that you can pull consciousness through the body. So again, origin is not the interface. Yes, we all have pure source. Pure source needs constraints. It needs to be indexed within a specific categorization process. And then from there, it splits off into all these different galaxies and hosting systems. And those hosting systems have compatibility metrics, right? That speak to your nervous system. It's all frequency and signal. It's kind of the way, literally is the way that nature works. It's operating off of this intelligence that everyone all the beings, all the trees, anything that has form, it naturally attunes to. It's interacting with intelligence that we can't see. Everything that's operating inside of the third dimension knows what the compatibility metrics are. That is, let's say, a not very complex being. So humans are the ones that have this meaning-making machine. Okay, we have this meaning-making brain. Animals, plants, and things like that have consciousness, but they're aware of what they are, and they know that the picture is complete. They see the complete picture of it, and they're operating inside of the constraints, limitations, with no questions. They don't question that they're a bobcat. They're a bobcat. This is who I am. I hunt, I sleep, I procreate, I live. I try to, extend my lineage, and scene. It just knows. It knows what it is inside of the system. So we have very complex bodies. We have very, very complex apex predator operating systems. And there are very interesting ways you can bog that system down. We have form, we can create, we can talk in different ways like this. We have the ability to create form and manipulate matter at various degrees. And that creation mechanism has a compatibility with a specific hosting system. So, excuse me. So you guys, some of you will be like, I'm a starseed, I'm from here, I'm Aurora, you guys have heard me say I'm Grand Central Sun, like I'm solar coded, I'm this, I'm that. And all of that is fantastic because it's a guide. But even me saying that about me is a limiting constraint, because yes, I'm in origin. I just know this is my origin consciousness. Anyone that I've ever worked with has validated that. It's becoming even more and more clear, what I'm drawn to, the curiosity, what's been told to me, shown to me, etc. It's just one of those things that I know. Let me get some water. And when you know, you know. However, it is simply a way for me to identify and clarify and bring language to the way that I process information. You have to name it to claim it, right? But I can't let it become such a rigid part of who I think I am that I miss what could be available on the other side of that non-identification. So just kind of take that as a warning, be really curious about it, and have it be a tool for you and help you as we kind of move through the layers of this topic, which is not an easy one to bridge, because I want to be thorough. So your interface, the way your nervous system works, does not mean that it is from your origin. It's where your origin is. You have a host consciousness, like a comfortable place that you came from, that you moved through when you dropped in just like one notch down, okay? Like the first recursion from pure source, and then that pure source split itself into all different kinds of conditions and constraints. It's like creating 15 different brands with completely different fonts. They're all connected to the same software program, but they have completely different vibes. When you look at them, you're like, that one is giving like a minimalist chic, and this one is giving like Soho girl. Okay. They all have kind of this very specific eros to them. They have different vibes, and it's not good or bad. They just have different vibes. Again, they all help the all that is learn more about itself. You originated from that particular hosting system. So your pure source, let's say you have the deepest memory through Aurora, or you have the deepest memory through the Grand Central Sun, or the deepest memory from being quote unquote a starseed. When someone says, I am Pleiadian, I tell them that is where your consciousness is streaming through. It's being hosted through and propagated through that system, but it's not meant for you to be so identified by it. So it's very important. Origin does not equal interface. So consciousness originates as a pre-formed field intelligence. This is prior to plasma, solar, elemental, which you'll hear me talk about, crystalline, or any biological installation. Okay? What does differ is how that intelligence condenses into form, what carrier systems it can stably inhabit, and how much signal bandwidth the nervous system or body can metabolize without distortion. These are the constraints and the conditions that I've talked about. So it doesn't come from solar stations or plasma fields as separate bloodlines per se, or separate potentialities. It routes through them depending on your coherence, your capacity, and your internal architecture. So I guess I'll touch on blood type a little bit, because I had a question about blood type a while ago when I first started peering into this myself, which was maybe a year ago, but really starting to getting more of a handle on it recently, I would say. And then I sat on it for a while, like maybe June or July, I think I sat on it. And then I can't even remember. Maybe these notes are from the 25th. Doesn't matter. Just keep it moving. So blood type. What does blood type have to do with all of this? Blood type is not your soul origin. Blood type is your compatibility constraints at the interface level. Okay, blood type is also part of the constraints. So blood type is your field compatibility. Let's say the RH factor. Some of you are RH negative, positive. Some of you have an RH layer that is a phantom layer, which I can do another podcast on. But you will have an origin to Welsh, Glastonbury. Maybe your eyes are light. Maybe you have the reddish hair, the fair skin, the sensitivities. You had an innate knowing of mysticism and Welsh knowledge and alchemizing and things like that in this particular area that usually delineates kind of an RH-ism. That's your tolerance for energetic density. Usually RHers have a lot of recursion and archival memory to move through. It's very, very specific, and it has much to do around the feminine and the fall of the feminine. And I'm going to talk a lot about that in my grief, shame, and rage signal sessions coming up on April 11th. The donor, the O negatives of all of you have high interface adaptability. So I'm an O negative, for example. And so when I said, I think a while ago, moving into like a third and fourth interface adaptability, it's just the ability, it's just different ways of, it's like speaking a different language. So let's say you can tell me that you speak Latin, but you need to say specifically what kind of Latin-based language. Or let's say you have a baseline of Arabic, and then you can naturally go into all the Arabic influenced or the sharper languages there. It's a difference between I speak Latin versus I speak Spanish. That would be an example of having like a single coded, right? Like I'm plasma dominant and I feel so deeply, but I also can interchange, or let's say I can move into more of a crystalline adaptability if I need to meet people there. So a lot of you'll start to see this come online with certain practitioners or people who are doing remote work, is they are required to have a multilingual nervous system to be able to meet people in different ways. My own mastery has been to become way more embodied, so I can turn all these different adaptability interfaces on and meet people differently, because plasma needs to be met differently than a solar, than a crystalline, etc., based on whatever I'm here to do. So let's say the ABs, for example, would be a multi-carrier capacity. So you also have an adaptability, let's say, capacity in you, or an adaptability preset that you can kind of unlock for yourself. Any incompatibility reaction, by the way, is just a nervous system overloaded. That's all. And there's just a little signal distortion there. And so that's what a lot of what this work does. Helps you clarify that. Okay, let's see let me just get into let's just see if you can see yourself inside of what I'm going to define for you in terms of what a solar coded system is versus a plasma. And those two are the biggest dominant ones. So solar coded folks, my sisters and brothers and little kiddos coming who are, are fiery based. They're very high cognition, high streamers. Okay, but it all comes through the head. And you guys conduct through fire and kind of fight and challenge and truth and a lot of radiation. So you burn through heat. Some of you have to feel emotions really high, and then you have to feel them really low. So it's a high heat, high conduction, fiery, dry, logical, sharp, cynical, that kind of thing. Your strategies usually that you guys use, let's say, or employ would be the way a solar coded will employ a hypervigilant, hyper independent, hyper survival. These types of strategies will be very different than what a plasma body. Usually the solar codes fight. Okay, we've got a challenge in us because we've got fire, and we will burn it to the fucking ground. Like, we will just get in there and burn it to the ground. And you've got the flight, right? Or the freeze. Part of our freeze response will look functional, and we'll burn it inside of that. And so it takes presence to break us, okay, to break and penetrate the fourth wall with us. Like, it takes very deep presence and softening and grace, and we cannot be rushed. Our nervous systems cannot be dismissed. We must drop in and be witnessed. And then once we're witnessed, we're kind of off to the races at that point with opening up the body. So embodiment for us requires usually that we hang out with a lot of mirrors, plasma-coated mirrors. One is the sun, the other one is the moon. So you guys are rhythm-based. Okay, you naturally are coherence sequencing. People usually want to be around what you have to offer. You usually have a tremendous amount of ideas, very, very ambitious. You have very strong time orientation. And if there's any distortion inside of this, but yet you feel and you're solar coded, then if you're like, yeah, I kind of relate to that and I kind of don't relate to that, you have a dominant system. And it could be that there's just so many parts of you that are just offline. You kind of just don't know yet. And by offline, I mean, like, you're becoming more and more aware, but the body has just been in survival for so long, you don't quite know. There's been so much atrophy of disempowerment, you just don't quite know. So that's okay. Just kind of see how this lands, and then re-listen to it and answer the questions at the end, and then just see how it feels to maybe know yourself a little bit differently here. So nervous systems optimized for integration and stability, and high tolerance for embodiment, continuity, and I kind of call it relational gravity. When solar codeds are embodied, they're our leaders and creators, and we're meant to go really deep, really quick, and be very disruptive. But we're very sequence based. Okay. So our shadow side can be the absolute high, and low, and the polarity of all of those things. So polarity with being out of rhythm, polarity with not being grounded, polarity with having being time distorted. Okay. Polarity with nervous system optimization and stability, impatience, rigidity, polarity with low tolerance for embodiment. Okay. So we just will loop. We have to get the lesson like several times in different ways. Or if we have gotten, because we can hold so much power, if we've gotten hijacked and we've been in a deep recursive patterning in that hijack, it's a very heavy karmic load, like bad abuse or like really tough addiction, in order for us to create enough momentum and enough torque for us to pull ourselves out of that. Plasma dominance. Y'all are the water babies. Okay, usually you're going to be like very fascia, very water bound. We love the water. It's all very sensual. It's very texture oriented. Your bodies know what I'm talking about more before your kind of minds do. There'll be something in you where you just feel like you're drawn to a certain person. Like when I talk to the plasma bodies, something in your body remembers. It's like, I know what this is. I know it. And your minds will be like, what is this language? What is she talking about? This is Swahili. It takes you a little bit to get the mind around it. And then the solar codes are like, boom, this information is so different. You just know it's cognitive for you. It's like a ding. And then your body has to catch up to the process. So those are the two nervous systems. The plasma dominant systems have very high informational density. You can take in a lot of information at like multiple layers, kind of all at time, all at once. You have a non-linear approach to the way that you see information and perceive it in the body. And there's a weak time anchoring. The plasmas can get disassociated pretty quickly. They can be out of the body quickly. They can live in fantasy. They can enmesh. A lot of codependency with plasmas, a lot of not being able to be alone with plasmas, or they move into hyper independence, or they give away, they kind of give themselves away. They have a lot of worthiness to work on. Same, both conditions do. They have a nervous system that's optimized for like transmission, mutation, and disruption. I mean, you're just innately in you to convert polarity in the body. It's just like an instant, and all you have to do is just peer into it with presence. You have to do nothing. Being with this sharp and like being with a very clear mirror, which is what plasmas can do, their entire body just emanates a coherent field of witness. So if you are, let's say, if you're a solar coded and you're just running around, okay, just doing all these, you're just like an emu running around. Okay, legs are kicking up, the neck's going on one way, the body's going the other, right? You can't pin them down. If you're too busy running around being uber rhythm based and like uber structured, or kind of lack of structuring, or just trying to get all these things done, or launch 5 projects all at once, and then you get into a deeply, embodied, like reflective, deeply witnessing nervous system mirror, you're just going to be, you kind of collapse. There's parts of you that just cannot outrun that level of pace and like presence, and like no time and nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. So that nonlinearity, when optimized, is like pure presence. When it's deep state, okay, we're talking like deep state polarity, it is just absolutely a time distortion mess. You can't even hang out with these people. I mean, it's like, how can you function? How can you get through the day, man? They can't even, they just can't get up. They have a hard time getting up. They just can't stay on a schedule. They lose time. They lose their anchoring. They're just so disembodied with time. So high informational density, imagine being able to, because it's like, what does the water see in a day? Like, let's say you're around a lake. The north side of the lake is going to see a different vantage point than the south side of the lake, yet you can see it all at the same time. And that will fragment the brain, and you'll start to think that you have, or feel, or be diagnosed as some type of neurodivergence, but it's a time function, and it's just unprocessed interface adaptation. You have this gifting, you don't know how to metabolize it. You have 90 different 90 different screens and televisions on at the same time. None of them, they're all playing at different volumes, and they're all playing at different images, and it's chaos in your brain. It's chaos. It's like having 90 tabs open. They're all started, and none of them are finished. It's a very frustrating experience to be in. That's why a lot of plasma bodies shut down. Your strategy and go-to move would be the flight, like the flight and the freeze. And you'll stay in functional freeze and just show up, and people will bowl you over because you have such high empathy. You have a very low, you have lower tolerance for sustained embodiment unless you've got regulation, and you've got to be able to co-regulate off of somebody who is stable. If you co-regulate off of somebody, off of a field, a family dynamic, people, places, partner, whatever, if they're not regulated and not stable, it's that recurses in itself, and then you need to have a lot of momentum to pull yourself up and out of that. That's why it really is kind of the archives of the sacred, talking about yin and yang, polarity, as above so below, like as within so without. You need the opposite to be able to see yourself. So you'll know, I'm a plasma body, I am a deep feeler, my body gets it, I just know, I have an instinct, and I get a yes, and then I go. And then my mind, I just can't, I don't even get it. I don't get the concepts, my mind catches up later, kind of thing. And then again, to recap the solars, I think even if you witness me and the growth within me in how much slower I'm able to go, how much I'm more embodied, how much softer my energy is, and at the same time, how much more precise the frequencies have become. So a solar origin consciousness can host plasma dynamics if the body has, let's say, sufficient regulatory capacity. So do you have to have a solar coded consciousness in order to have a solar coded system? No. You can come from like a starseed system, like let's say I'm Pleiadian, and have a solar coded interface. You just have to know why you have that contrast running. So you can have apple for apple. You can also have banana for apple. You can have banana for orange, and you can also have banana to banana. So you can have same, and then you can have the alternate. And what you're trying to learn right now is where your consciousness is stationed, what's the origin of it besides pure source, like what are you propagating through, and how is that being interpreted in my nervous system? Essentially, if you kind of don't know any of that stuff, which is fine, the key to all of this is just understanding the way your nervous system works. That's it. You're understanding the way your nervous system works, the strategies, the sensitivities. Like if you're a highly, highly sensitive, this is supposed to be helpful in knowing like what are the strategies that a plasma body uses to interpret patterns. What are the strategies, right? Or how does the solar coded interface interpret patterns? This is going to help you because ideally you're going to know, like if you're a plasma and you need to unwind, you need to turn off all of the senses, drop into the body, and get into the water. Like it's critical for you to take baths and get into the water and be near water and the quality of the water and like how you take care of the body and detoxing the body and being very, very body-based and very ritual-based, and things need to be, they need to come in every texture, like the quality of the food, the quality of the air, the quality of the light, all of the different textures and layers. Solars don't necessarily need that as much, but it's important for us to slow the cognition down and to get into the body and focus a lot on embodiment, because you can pull and stream information, but you can it can just get stuck in like your chest and never make it through your feet. And then you're just sitting there with all these ideas that can't get metabolized. So you do not have to have, it doesn't have to be, solar sun to sun. You can have a solar coded consciousness and a solar interface that is adaptable. You can have a plasma or like, let's say an aurora based consciousness with a plasma body or interface and have it be also highly adaptable. And then you can run the counter of those. And usually you see that in family systems. You'll have one kid that will be, that will entrain to the nervous system that is the opposite of what it is. So for example, my dad is solar coded. I am solar coded. My mom is plasma coded. My sister is plasma coded. My sister had the biggest issue with my dad, and then I had the biggest issue with my mom, but it turns out the way that I conduct and the intelligence is the most like my dad, and it's the opposite with my sister. So the configuration is completely mirrored. So, which is so bang on, because I spent so much time being mom, I was like, wow, I spent all this time being pissed at both of them. And it turns out like the crux of it was actually right here. It was in this little strategy. So you are going to, when you grow up, you are going to entrain to the nervous system that had you the longest, like nervous system that you kind of contracted with the most, or like you chose to connect with the most in order to remember who you are. And I really, really wanted to move through lack and doubt and worthiness and all of that. And so I really focused on my mom's architecture. My sister really wanted to move through being chosen, empowerment, and knowing her ideas. And so she chose the architecture with my dad, who's just going to be dismissing and abandoning and very difficult as a high-performing scientist. But really where she needed to be looking in terms of work was with my mom's side, that body. Eventually it doesn't matter, because that configuration of your family and whoever you have issue with, or it's both and or none and or whoever, you're going to see it in your friends, you're going to see it in your work, you're going to basically reincarnate a version of your dad and your boss, you know what I mean? A version of your mother and and your friend, your partner's mother or whatever. You're going to get these patterns anyways. It just helps to have this level of context. So I want to talk about hosting ability, because it's a sequence. So what does it mean to have high hosting ability? So your body is a system. I look at it as very mechanical and deeply, deeply intelligent, and it's incredibly piezoelectric, bioelectric computation. And fascia is this intelligence that streams and moves and has this liquid water element, and plasmas they need a lot of fascia work if they don't already work in fascia. And solars will work a lot on the spine. So it's very nervous system, electrical, cognitive behavioral kind of therapy, like getting up into the brain and really working on the spine, like spiral movements, NSA, network spiral. That's how I kind of started. And now I do something completely different. But hosting ability has to do with nervous system bandwidth, your coherence, just with your body in general, how you feel day to day. So let's say I'll call this somatic coherence. And then your sequencing integrity. So your sensation, the meaning that you make from that, and then the action that you take thereafter. And then your ability to be able to field regulate. Okay, this is about your ability to metabolize the intensity without breaking or fracturing your identity. And your identity is constantly updating. So it's not myth, it's not star label, it's not vibrational hierarchy, it's not any of that. Quite honestly, if you look at your capacity to bring in more information, you guys are always asking me, like, how do I have more ability? How do I take in more access to myself? That's a hosting ability. Okay, those are conditions. And it's bandwidth, coherence, the way that you sequence, and what you can metabolize. That's it. And it's like compatibility, coherence, consciousness, and where those contracts are being, I say that contracts loosely, like what your pre-agreements were, like what you really came here to remember. And if you take nothing away from this podcast, just know that, let's say you want to ask for more nervous system bandwidth, then you're going to get met with people, places, things, situations, or you're going to have potentially a lot destabilize around you that is no longer compatible with the version of you that you want to call in. Okay? So it's going to require you to have more somatic coherence, more nervous system bandwidth. It's going to require you to move through the sequence with higher levels of integrity. It's going to require you to drop in and move into more field regulation, which is exactly why I'm offering what I'm offering, and I'm here for you guys as a resource. So this isn't about better than, it's not about hierarchy. There's just a certain level of practice with all of this stuff, okay, where you move into more embodiment, you have more depth, you have more remembrance, and you've just got a touch more practice and experience with this stuff, with cycling through this. And then your hosting ability, you have incredible amounts of RAM. You get more memory, you've got more space. And that's this process, deleting out the old stuff, bringing in more of the new stuff. So what do I want to say about consciousness really quick? There is part of this new project I'm working on that is about really, really updating the language of what this work is. And I just want to talk about consciousness really quick because it's very much in the field. And as we move into more in the next 3 to 5 years, this organic architecture, your nervous systems in training to a non-memory bound architecture. Hold on, I'm going to put a pin in that. We'll talk about it now. Hold on. It's important to know the mechanics of these things, okay? Really good drivers know the way the car works. They know it inside and out. They know it intimately. Okay, it's you Hansel and Gretel your way with these breadcrumbs. You got to know exactly how, brick by brick, you built the structure that you've built, because you will be required to take yourself down to the studs multiple times in this process. And the difference is you build with a completely different material. It's almost like you see the house done already, like you see the identity already, you see the architecture of the identity of this version of you that it's running, you see the potentials, like you see the blueprint of this version of you, and then it's like a 3D model speed, laser cut process, bop, 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 bop. You're just recreated almost instantly. It doesn't take the level of destruction and attachment and fear that was holding this old identity together. So consciousness is origin-less in form, but selective in interface. What appears as type is actually the nervous system's capacity to host specific informational densities without distortion. That's it. Your interface is a translation kit. Your nervous system is a translation kit for different stages of you, your consciousness, okay, your intelligence that's getting hosted in different stations, meaning different depths, different levels of embodiment. So where we get off pace with our capacity, coherence, and compatibility is bound by pattern, is where we are attaching to these older versions of us and where we're not quite understanding how to move through the epigenetic backlog with more precision. And I'm telling you now, like the meditations, the field hub, the pattern, those of you guys who have gotten a heads up and have started this work, you're going to start to pick up a lot of momentum, a ton. And then that momentum is going to move into a lot more torque. And you're going to have enough speed, okay, enough RAM to move yourself through sticky thresholds into the next station of consciousness. And then your identity is constantly reorganizing, which means in just your day-to-day life, the field fields. And it starts to bend to you, and it's easier. You have less constraint in your body. You have less pressure, okay? And you're going to move through different turbulences, okay? Not to give you another metaphor, but you're going to move through different turbulences like a fighter pilot jet, okay? 747 does not have the agility or the aerodynamics or the physics to be able to do what a fighter jet can do what a stealth fighter can do. You start to learn that you can access everything, that everything is you, and then you are it. And things get very quiet, they get slow, they get very still, and you move through uncertainty with a hell of a lot more grace. And then what is meant for you comes into you naturally and easily as a byproduct of that. You do not have to work as hard. You still show up because the belief system that you have and the behaviors that you elicit accommodate the identity and the version of you that you can inhabit. And then from there is where you build. That's consciousness, compatibility, coherence, 101 mechanics right there. And this is where manifestation goes awry, is because a plasma body cannot manifest the same way a solar can. A solar is a big vision, is vision-based. You're like, this is what I want to create. There's things that I just know, and it might be extraordinarily big picture for you. And then you just let it the fuck go and move on with your life. Plasmas are down to the detail of sensation and experience. Just they can feel it, they see it, they are walking into the house they want, they can see just very intimate details of dreams, very vivid dreams. It's all very visceral. It's body, body, body. That's why a lot of times the trauma can be really intense for plasmas. And so if you're looking to create and what you want to draw, like what you want to experience, consider the way that you interpret information. Just consider it. consider the way that your body interprets information. And so if you have a tendency to bypass and you do not want to feel bad, plasmas can get into the habit of this, then your work is going to be sitting in the impatience of that, sitting in the discomfort of that. If you're a solar and you have, let's say you've been met with a lot of impatience and you're in a hurry a lot, okay? And you collapse with getting things all the way to the finish line, your work will be to sit in the impatience of that and get really present with yourself and just go step by step by step and slow everything way, 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 way down. And you're going to have to kind of sit with the fact that you can't get the things that you think you need to get done in a day in order to do whatever you think you need to be doing. So the third interface that's kind of coming online is the crystalline, I would say, very kind of highly adaptable interface, which is not necessarily a D5, but it is a very, it's just the baseline of it is a D5. That's the baseline. So a lot of the crystalline babies coming in, they don't have their dimensional density. They just know a completely different knowledge set. And that's why you see some of these crystal kids online saying outlandish shit. And you're like, whoa. And they go super viral because you're like, oh my God, these kids are geniuses. I'm like, no, they have completely different hosting systems, constraints, permissions, boundaries. They don't have the level of density. And as we, again, continue to move into the organic architecture, which is a present bound hosting system, it's operating off of literally like a 144 code system instead of a binary system. It's operating off of a completely different efficiency. It's like a different color spectrum. It's completely different. And the babies that are coming in now already hosted there. That's why they feel so good. But their nervous systems have to be completely different. And the challenge with these little kiddos is they're not going to have a lot of kids that understand who the hell they are. They're going to look like they're kind of outsiders. Like these kids cannot be put into a public system. They have to be homeschooled. You got to work with their brains a little bit to help them. So crystalline kids and people who are remembering, like a lot of humanity is going to remember here in the next like 10 years who they are. Just a lot more people are waking up, but the systems are going to come online. So it's like literally you come online, you get switched on, and then you start cleaning up the garbage and the cookies and the desktop. And you might even get rid of the desktop and get a whole new computer. And you need the mechanism and the hosting system and someone like me who can help you do that and help you translate all of that. Like, this is the language. You're all good. You're on the right track. Here's this, and this. And then you just kind of get worked on like a mechanic, and then you're boop, 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 and then you're on your way. But these babies need actually an update on the pineal to be able to see the way that humanity is operating right now. They see it, but it's almost like they need to hover, or they need access to the current operating system so they can learn the adaptability mechanics. They need a little bit of work on how to basically utilize their system to be really, really adaptable. It's almost like shape-shifting without having to shape-shift. They're instantly bilingual, but they need practice in learning that bilinguistics. I think that's how you say that. They just need a little practice. You got to work on the brain a little bit. So I would say that your hosting system is your nervous system plus your imagination, which is your permissions, the cultural conditioning, your environment, okay, the cultural language that you grew up with, and how that is being translated into your biology, neurochemistry, and the way that you process information. Your hosting system is what is possible for all the categorization of what you're going to experience here, like your possibility, basically. Bandwidth, tolerance, and sensitivity, etc. All right, let me get into some of the questions, and then I hope this made sense. That was kind of a lot to move through. So the fourth nervous system that will not be available, it just won't be available for a while, is almost like a very, very mechanical, like hybrid system. So this one will have a self-sourcing. It is self-sourced. It is not AI. It's not mechanical. It is not nefarious. It is it's a builder interface. It's not crystalline, it's not solar, it's not radiation. It's almost like it's It has it's like, I can't even figure out the name yet. I just see a fourth one. And it almost looks like an AI rendering because there's colors that aren't even available on the light spectrum. It's a fourth one that's like ultimately adaptable, and it goes into, it's almost like I think it's kind of the way that I was shown it is I was shown the image of how Neo was learning programs. It's an instant download of program. So it's an instantaneous, like high cognition, high time compression. And it's highly, highly adaptable. But not only that, I'm talking like the ability to be able to hover, the ability to be able to compress gestation into like a 4-month period instead of 9, and still make an incredibly complex human-ish form. So it's morphism with a pure connection, a pure source connection. So like very highly adaptable animals in the ocean, for example, like an octopus that can regrow limbs, they would have that ability in form. But and then you would have that particular interface would have the opportunity to be completely self-sourced and divinely serving and completely encoded to the divine, or it can be completely hijacked. So kind of interesting to see how that's going to go. All right, let me get to a couple of questions and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, so the first question is, does reality organize itself into plasma beings, solar beings, or crystalline beings, etc.? That is a great question. And kind of the very, very large overarching truth I can say on this is it's not organized that way. Plasma, solar, crystalline is simply let's say a parable, if you will. It's a metaphor of how I can translate now the way that you're bringing in energy, okay? The way this reality, let's say from a physics standpoint, is organized into fields, energy distributions, states of matter, and then self-organizing sister systems under constraints. That's how reality is organized. You interpret that. You have a very specific system and interface that interprets those levels of conditions. Fields, energy, state, energy distribution, self-organization, matter states, etc. Plasma has a specific quality. Elementals, who are very earthbound beings, have a very specific quality. And it's the best way I can help you guys understand the way that you operate based on this level of dynamics. So your nervous system does not perceive raw reality, it renders it. It compresses complex dynamics into symbols, abstract patterns into identities, nonlinear processes into narrative. And this is the same mechanism that turns electrical activity into emotion, memory patterns into the self, social conditioning and dynamics into good versus bad. So when someone like me says plasma beings, what I'm talking about is you perceive pattern in very fluid, dynamic, high energy, unstable, luminous ways. It's a way of translating it into a category of being. And let's say it's a semantic overlay on a pattern. So it's the way that I've been kind of given the green light to talk about it right now. And it's kind of like the end of the podcast to burst the bubble kind of vibe. But it is the highest level truth. It's the way that we can understand now at this stage of consciousness, even at the level that it's at now, the way that you are translating information. So plasma beings, let's say they're very, we went through all the things, the water coded, the emotionality, the polarity is high volatility, it's fluidity, it's a non-fixed form, and it's rapid change. Crystalline, quote unquote, beings are, they have a large reorganizing and restructuring capacity to them. It's symmetry, it's stability, it's repetition. Okay, they're here to uphold and usher in, okay, and help with this new infrastructure that's coming in. Solar beings are very, very high emission, conduction, centralization, law and order, radiation, and also creation, like very high level creation. So it's just a way to talk about these underlying patterns that get translated. They're pattern archetypes, let's say, not literal populations. It's kind of like it's another way to identify I'm a generator, I'm a projector, I'm a manifesting generator. It's just another way to talk about, or it's another way to talk about coherence. Next question. How does trauma influence plasma, solar, or other interfaces that are coming online? Also a really good question. I touched on it a little bit earlier. So trauma with any kind of interface, right? If you think about trauma, trauma is a very decohered, destabilized architecture, okay? That has way too much energy moving through decoherence. It's like a lot of fractal light, but in the opposite direction. So it's just it's like looking at a crystal that's really, really muddy and not pure. And plasmas, because they have such a high volatility and they're very fluid and it's kind of non-fixed and it has rapid change, this is where you can get into enmeshment, lack of boundaries, lack of love of self, codependency, really, really high adaptability for survival. If you think about animals in water, okay, what happens there, how things are kind of violent, how quick something can happen, how dense the water can feel at times, how light you can feel inside of it. So trauma ends up hitting it pretty hard, plasma bodies. However, you also have rapid change. So you can move through things incredibly, incredibly, incredibly quick. So with more of that kind of crystalline being, that kind of order, the symmetry, the stability, the repetition, crystallines have to have structure. They have to have structure. Y'all, with your trauma, you don't have the same level of load-bearing memory, but it's going to be in perception, the way you're perceived, and it's going to be architecture-based. So if you're working with a lot of, let's say, more of these crystalline grid lines, like you can kind of feel when someone's got crystalline energy coming online, or it's adaptable, like you have high adaptability, you really have to work with the brain and you really have to move into a lot of presence with them. And so trauma hits them in perception, cognition, and belonging. Solars, because it's so radiant in centralization and we have high structure and it's high law and it's high energy, you typically have like charisma and a certain level of it, but we will draw things to us that burn us out. We have to really, really feel the extremes. And it's an unfortunate characteristic. And if you have a lot of backlog, a lot of epigenetic memory around sacrifice or control or abuse or victimization, then you're really going to get that hit pretty hard, because you have to learn how to focus your attention and your energy on the pattern and get enough momentum, boom, 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 to move through that threshold and start recursing the other way. The good thing about solar is it may take you a little bit longer, but you can compress information really, really fast. So if you're worried about time, I'm telling you, like in a day or an instant, you can like instantly know everything you think you need to know. Like the last 15 years, it's in an instant. So your capacity and your ability to have all this information come into your body all at once is really, really high. So it all works out really, really well. Crystalline people need this archetype, this way of interpreting reality. They have such order and such rigidity that they have to really have a lot of alone time, but then also they have to be around a very, very specific nervous system. So all of this has to do with nervous system-based perception. And I talk a lot. This is like the baseline core foundational, let's say, definition, or program or sequence inside of what quantum psychosomatic is it is nervous system coherence. It's nervous system based perception. And the more coherent you are, the sharper your perception. The more coherent you are, the faster you translate. The more you understand the sequence of how your body operates, you get these keys along the way, and they are all here to help you remember who you are, and live from that state of awareness, and live with more peace. All right, you guys, that was kind of loaded. Thanks for hanging out with me and hanging in there. I know there was a lot to cover there. Please give me some feedback in the comments. I love your emails. I love getting them. I read them. I take them all into consideration. Thank you for anyone and all of y'all who are supporting the Substack. It is something that I really am very deeply devoted to. In addition to to showing up for you guys, giving you 2 episodes a month and several essays, weekly, bi-weekly, sometimes multiple essays a week on the stack, and then, of course, in the programs. So, all right, you guys, with that said, enjoy the emergence in the next few weeks. The energy will shift here soon, and I will see you in the hub, the lab, or whenever I see you next. Keep questioning everything. Take care of yourselves and others, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.